Welcome to Open Mic from Modalis Infrastructure Partners, where aviation talks and the world listens. From global airport and aviation developments to disruptive technology, airport investment, and much more, we unpack the trends, technologies, challenges, and opportunities shaping the global aviation industry. Now here's your host, Curtis Grad.
So welcome back to the Airport IR Open Mic by Modalis. I've got my guest today, Piervittorio from Tirana, Albania. That's his current post. But as we'll hear, he's been in a number of different and interesting places around the world. So we'll get into that in a bit. Piervittorio, welcome, and happy to have a chat with you today.
It's my pleasure, Curtis. I heard the first one from Athanasius, and I'm eager to participate to this one as well.
Absolutely. And I feel like the three of us are sort of like brothers from another mother, but we'll have to get together one of these days properly.
Exactly. We need to find a way to meet again. Well, we met recently a lot, so, we need to find a way to meet him as well.
Yeah. You and I meet, and he and I meet, but never in the same place, right? So, Piervittorio, we met just over 2.5 years ago. As you mentioned, we've seen each other a lot lately, but we met sort of virtually, and that was through a mutual friend of ours, Patricia Morgan. She's certainly one of my favorite human beings, and I'm sure you would agree as well.
Absolutely. I had worked with Patricia in IATA and the then still developing IATA and consulting. We still were finding our ground. Now the consulting activities of IATA have grown, have involved a larger number of people, and have become even more far-reaching. And at the time, it was a little experimental, considering that we were doing mostly work on behalf of airlines. They were asking for improvement in capacity, safety, or trying to set up an aviation law or an aviation industry in a country they were interested to operate with, And Patricia was particularly good at doing this. I mean, I supported her because the project was already in Mozambique for creating an aviation law, and imagine creating an aviation law in Portuguese, which is not really the language of Patricia nor mine, but yes, she's a fantastic human being with a great history herself. Hopefully one day maybe you can find the time, she can find the time to do a podcast herself.
Yeah, she's been doing a lot of great work with us, and she's kind of like our Marine. She gets on the ground and takes the beachhead for us. So it's been a great introduction to you and your IATA experience. That was, if I remember correctly, you were both based in Montreal at the time, right?
Both Montreal, and I was leading, let's say, the ATM consulting activities, and she was more on aviation development and, like I said, aviation law, setting up the industry, the regulator, supporting the regulator. But we had a great time together. Airlines usually will send us in funky location because, of course, they didn't need help to fix problems in Germany, or Canada. Yeah. So, we ended up doing a lot of work in Latin America, in the Middle East, in Africa in particular, and I had fun also doing projects in all these continents while at IATA. There was a far-reaching exercise, let's say, even more than what I had done before when I was in the States.
Yeah, it's always an adventure, and we all have a list of what we call NFCs, no fun countries, but we won't list them today. But yeah, there's some that are more fun than others for sure. I guess before IATA, you were almost a decade as a consultant with NATS and Landrum Brown. So presumably with NATS, was that airspace and air traffic management?
Airspace and air traffic management, especially for project in Italy. There was the time that NATS had become a company that was floating on the stock market. Some of their employees were having stock options, and Europe was... the union was, trying to liberalize some of these services, which unfortunately, not a lot happened since. So we still have a very fragmented airspace in Europe. But at the time, we were talking about functional airspace block, CESAR, single European sky, was almost 20 years ago, but we didn't move much. Landrum Brown is different because Landrum Brown was with this already then very old firm, because I think at that time we celebrated the 50th anniversary of his foundation.
Yeah.
So they started during the war, and these two gentlemen, Mr. Landrum and Mr. Brown, and they invented the concept of master plan. So what I was doing was to work on different master plan, mostly about Chicago.
Yeah.
And what I actually, the project that we started then, and that was 20 years ago, is what you see now if you go to Chicago. But some of the things are still there. You can still see the old ORD, Orchard Field, underlying the new one, with more parallel runways and whatnot. And for me was an experience, because actually I wanted to be an aerospace engineer. So building rockets, literally, had nothing to do with the airport or aviation per se. I wanted to be a rocket scientist. And eventually, thanks to Landrum Brown, I switched to aviation and airport in particular. So master plan, noise, fast time simulation, airspace capacity. And so that's why I drifted at one point to NATS and eventually to IATA. That's how, all connected together.
Yeah, that's the thread. So, but then it seems you started an idea of moving away from what I call the dark arts of consulting, and you tried your hand at airport management, and seems like that's stuck. You've been doing that for, well, ever since. That took you eventually to Tirana, but how did you get there?
In few times, I mentioned to friends and family that I miss being a consultant. I miss traveling the world. I miss jumping from a project to another. And then I'll come back to it when we speak to Tirana. I'll come back on that, because that's what I'm doing right now in Tirana, this thing. But basically, I was contacted by people working at the airport of my own town. So back in Umbria, I'm an Italian, born in Perugia, but in reality live in between Perugia and Assisi, and that's where I grew up. And the airport is exactly in between Perugia and Assisi. And I used to go there when I was a kid, and they contacted me back because they got money. It was a project financed to celebrate the 150th anniversary of Italy as a country, a unified country. And so they were spending their money, but they didn't have anybody to work on the project, to finalize the project, do the ORAT, let's say, in a way, although it's a very small regional airport, and then run it. And so they offered me to go back. I'd never done airport management per se, but the most complicated part for me was the people management, because I was project manager especially for IATA, managing consultants and SMEs, but those are usually very experienced and with strong personality people, and so in a way it was easier and more challenging. But there you have to be a mentor. You need to be conscious of labor laws and dealing with the union, for example. So but I gladly went back because it was my own town, it was my own airport, and I wanted to contribute. So I stayed 5 years there. Then I moved to Calabria, southern Italy, where I was running not one but 3 regional airports. They were all under the same umbrella, so it was an airport system. And again, this was for another 5 years. And then eventually somebody proposed me the possibility of joining Tirana Airport, which as exotic as might sound for an Italian, is not that exotic. It's just across 60 miles of water. It's crossing from Illinois to Michigan almost, But the reality is that it's a completely different environment, socially and linguistically and culturally. It's the Balkans. It's not, but the reality is that the people are the same. We speak a different language, but the people are the same and the problems are the same. And we share a lot of common Mediterranean culture. And so the transition was easy on that part. What became complicated, not complicated, but challenging was, dealing with all these projects that I've done, as a consultant, one, in a place or another one in another, doing them or addressing them all at once, in Tirana, basically at the same time, while running an airport that was growing at the pace that I've never seen anywhere else.
It's incredible. We've been watching that from a distance, but remind me, like, from when the Kastrati Group took the concession to, I guess, what you're projecting for the end of this year, what's the growth been?
Kastrati actually took the concession in December 2020. So at that time, the airport was about 2 million passengers, but in 2019, it was 3.3 million passengers. And we are closing this year at about almost 12 million passengers.
That's the fastest growing in Europe, right?
Fastest growing in Europe is 250% plus versus 2019. ACI Europe just certified that in 2024, our connectivity level had grown 56% versus 2019. We are running now 120 direct routes. Wizz Air just, celebrated yesterday 20 million passengers flown by the base, but the base was created 5 years ago. So, in 5 years, they've flown 20 million passengers already. So these are the numbers that we are dealing. And, so
That's incredible.
It's
absolutely
operation,
incredible.
it's capacity generation, is changing the airspace, dealing with the airport stakeholder, making sure there's enough fuel in the tanks just to sell it, because sometimes you also have to consider that airlines are arriving and you want to make sure that there's no shortage of JP4 or Jet A1.
It must have been like jumping on a runaway train. Like, you're jumping on it as it's basically blazing down the track. That, and that infrastructure was never built for 12 million passengers, right?
It's I have to say, it's not a mission impossible, because it sounds like, a Tom Cruise movie, but it's not a mission impossible because all the stakeholders play the same game with the same goal. Everybody wants to have maybe a prevalent role, of course, the Civil Aviation Authority, NSPs, but the airlines, but the reality is that everybody found that there's a market that was totally untapped, because you don't just grow 40% or 250% in 5 years because, you put routes or you put scheduled flights. There has to be also passengers that fill those planes. And so clearly there was an untapped market that nobody cared before to work on or incentivize. And the Kastrati Group came, did it. And, they told me that Mr. Kastrati, Chef Kastrati, the founder of the group, at one point at the very beginning said that, I'm going to bring this airport to 10 million. And there were people, like in the back of the room, saying, "Oh, this guy is crazy," or what is he talking about? Yeah. There's our CEO still has a plaque in his office that is half hidden, but it was a poster they put, that in 2020, I think it was 2025, they would have reached 5 million passengers. Was one of these. Nice inspirational poster that you have on your wall.
Like the mission statement. Yeah, exactly.
It took him a year to put it up and then put it down because already was past the mark.
Yeah. Well, when I came to visit you a few months back, and again, that was actually the first time we'd met face to face, and I remember arriving at the airport and seeing the Kastrati logo in the airport. And then I'm in the taxi and I see a gas station with Kastrati. Then I arrive at the hotel, which has a Kastrati logo. And even the crane that was working on the hotel was Kastrati. I'm like, well, this is an integrated group, right? They're into almost everything. So maybe for the listeners, you can describe a little bit about who and what the Kastrati Group are. It's quite an interesting story, right?
Well, Albania is an interesting story as a whole because for 45 years and plus until 1992, the country was, became a communist regime, which wasn't uncommon in Eastern Europe, but became progressively paranoid and more close to the point that we used to call them the North Korea of Europe. Nobody could come out and nobody would get in. And so comes 92, the then communist regime decided to to indict new election and, authorize things like private properties and entrepreneurial activities. So Mr. Kastrati decided to concentrate on importing fuel oil derivatives like fuel, diesel, for cars that didn't really exist at that time, but he could anticipate that the next thing it would have been buying cars. And that's what happened. And so he started like that. And they venture in all sorts of different industries, from insurance to bottled water, to hotel. But the focus now for them is three-pronged, let's say. Construction, of course, but in terms of hospitality, especially, so to create opportunities for additional tourists to come, especially high-end ones.
Yes.
The other one is concession. They already own the airport or run the airport. They already run a private commercial harbor. They have one of the two tollway in the country. So, concession for infrastructure. And the third one would be energy. Of course, they already had almost the monopoly, as you've seen, on oil and gasoline and diesel, but now they are very much focused on green energy. The country was already very green because they use almost 90% of renewable energy because of hydroelectric dams that they have everywhere, but they put it on more and more solar plant. Albania is normally a very sunny country, and it's paying off, and they're exporting also the energy. There's also talks to transfer energy to Italy, for example.
And you were saying it's actually a concession, not an outright ownership of the airport, correct?
It's a concession, yes, and it's until 2040. We are making plans now because we're going to start the master plan exercise, a realistic one. In the past, the master plan was designed to accommodate the obligation of the concession, so to speak. Now we need to really look at what's going on because we just engaged IATA to provide us the forecast, and we will looking soon for a company to advise on the master plan. But there might be talks to build another terminal or another runway. We don't know. Let's see what the future can hold.
Well, in the best of times, doing a traffic forecast is, again, that's another dark art, but trying to forecast this airport's growth, that could be a bit tricky. And if I remember correctly, you said handling 12 million passengers this year, but the country is what, 2-3 million people?
It's 2.78, I think, with the Diaspora, which is maybe twice as much, or at least they claim it was as much. The main market is still Italy, where there are about 1 million people. They have Albanian connection, either first or second generation Albanians. And so 45% of our traffic is to and from Italy, and another 15 towards Germany for the same reason. So there's a lot of connection because of the diaspora, but also now is just growing this incoming market for tourism that is creating this additional growth.
The most famous diaspora is Dua Lipa, right? She's got Albanian heritage. I know everybody tries to claim a little bit of her, but they're pretty proud of her Albanian roots, that's for sure.
Well, Mother Teresa also, although she was born in the Ottoman Empire, but she was an Albanian ethnic. So everybody in the Balkan claims her, basically, because she was born in, Macedonia, what is now Northern Macedonia. But the ethnicity is Albanian.
Yeah, well, the airport's actually named after Mother Teresa, right?
Yes, exactly. Correct.
Correct. Yeah. So before we go a little bit deeper into our visit in Tirana, I want to ask you something. We like to do this with all of our guests because we've got these crazy careers working in different places and landing in, and as I said, sometimes NFCs, non-fun countries, and what have you. But you must have a crazy story or one of the craziest stories that you can share. I'd love to hear what's kept you amused when you've been traveling in some of these projects.
Well, one happened at my airport in Perugia, as a fun fact, let's say, but we had a lot of VIP traffic there, mostly going to nearby Tuscany because Florence Airport wasn't really accessible, doesn't have a lot of capacity, it's not a big airport as well. And so some were using Perugia Airport. And one evening, we were waiting for a certain Hollywood director that is famous for a 9 movies saga about some intergalactic characters. And when he landed, he has a property there. When he landed, I line up all the 10 guys that on the ramp with, marshalling one. It was night, so marshalling one light up, and they look like a bunch of Jedi waiting for the Emperor or something like that.
Oh, man. And he was using the Force, right? Absolutely. Yes. That's funny.
So we see him giggled while he was walking by to reach the van. Yeah. Another not that nice story. This time we were doing a project for the World Bank in Nigeria, and with some ATM experts. Some of them are from NAV Canada, for example, and in particular case, we were at Port Harcourt Airport. taking picture to realize whether we could put enough procedures there or how they will work or take measurement. But unfortunately, that day, the president of Nigeria was landing. So they saw these 2-3 guys with strange equipment taking measurement with satellite, receiver or whatnot. So the presidential guard came, threw us on the ground, put the Kalashnikov in our face and the boot on the chest, and yelling that they were going to shoot us. Thank God our escort from CAA of Nigeria and the NSP of Nigeria explained who we were. But in that minute, it was a fairly scary story, so to speak.
Welcome to our country. Have a nice day, right?
Yeah.
But all the countries that we've been in, either working or consulting, traveling, I find every country has good people. At the end of the day,
absolutely.
It's the politicians that create the problems. But every country I've worked in, either as an expat or as a consultant, you find great people. And I've got recent examples like Seychelles and Panama and where have you. But the fun of the work that we do is you get to meet a lot of different people from different places, but they all have the same challenges. Like every airport that you go to has the same problems. It's in a different place, but all the same challenges are there, and the people are the ones that are going to solve it, right? The people that are living on the ground.
And like you said, I've been in funky places. Some, not even my wife knows that I've been, but just to mention, Sudan or Yemen or Colombia in some cases, But the reality is that the people in aviation, if they have chosen this industry for what it is, there's a love and as an understanding you share, regardless whether you can speak the same language to begin with or you share the same culture.
Exactly. Now we talked a fair bit about the airport in Tirana, but that visit. Again, that was the first time we'd met, and then I guess almost back to back, we met in 2 or 3 different conferences in the last couple of months, and had a really good chance to get better acquainted. But one of the things I was struck, you're a bit of an amateur historian, and you love discovering the history of places. And when I had that very short stop in Tirana, you took the time to walk me around the old quarter and give me a bit of a history lesson. So, for the benefit of our listeners, I'd love to hear a little bit more about that history. And, it's quite remarkable, that transformation that you talked about from the communist era, but there's lots of interesting architecture. There's the Ottoman history as well. There's a lot of things to talk about. But from your perspective, would love to hear what you discovered about the country.
It's a fascinating country. Of course, we didn't know much about the communist time, but we knew exactly what was going on before. The main number of Albanian was called Durrës, Durazzo for the Venetian, and the Dyrrachium from the Romans, but was actually a Greek city. And so the location of this harbor is been there for more than 2,500 years, and has been Greek, Illyrian Greek, and then Roman, and then stayed in the Roman Empire until it collapsed. Then eventually was in the what they call Eastern Roman or Byzantine Empire for another 1,000 years, and then eventually became Ottoman for 500 years ago. So all these are sedimented in the culture, even in the food, if you want, in the language, and you can see Roman, you can see Ottoman, you can see Greek ruins everywhere. And of course, this is a land of people going through. The Romans had the Via Appia that was eventually ended up in Bari, and then the continuation was from this harbor, Dyrrachium, Durrës, and then all the way with the Via Ignatia or Ignatia, all the way to Istanbul, Constantinople. So this was the main road going from Rome to Constantinople at that time. This is where St. Paul or St. Peter went through, to go eventually be martyrized in Rome. So there's a lot of history, and they are proud of their history. It's a very proud people, and they should be so. Some of the part of the country were nominally only under the Ottoman Empire because they were fiercely independent, and they never really managed the Ottomans to control them, completely, so to speak. It's fascinating to discover. There are several UNESCO sites and natural wonders. Like there's a river that has been left untouched from the spring in Greece all the way to the Adriatic, and it looks like any river would have been, 1,000 or 2,000 or a million years ago, so to speak.
Well, what amazed me when we stood in the center of the square there was, you see the old brutalist architecture of the communists. You see the half a block away, you've got the mosque from the Ottoman times. You've got this new modern building that's coming out of the ground, and as you showed me when we positioned it has the profile of a face, and if you do a 360 degree, like for an architecture student, this would be the place to go to literally go through the history of different styles of architecture. It was
absolutely this is
striking.
Actually, a lot to do with the prime minister, which is a very skillful politician, of course, because he's been just re-elected for the fourth time, but he's also a scholar and a painter and an artist. And so I think he wants his capital not just to be functional, but also beautiful. And he started when he was a mayor and he's continuing now. And, I used to live in Chicago. And in Chicago, if you are an architecture student, you find all the different style, all the different architects, Mies van der Rohe, but it's becoming the same thing, here in Tirana, just a little more modern architect instead of the ones of Chicago, but the feeling is the same.
And the hotel that I stayed at there, what was the name of that hotel again?
Gecko Imperiale.
It reminded me of an old Canadian Pacific hotel, like those historic railway hotels in Canada, but it's actually much more of a modern modern construction, but in the old style. But it was very well done, right?
Yes. And fun fact, you were in what is called the bloku, which I used to think it was basically a transliteration of the block, because as you see, there were, the grid system for most of the roads. But the reality was because it was blocked out. That was the area where the oligarchia and the nomenclatura would live, but the military would keep everybody else out of the area. That was fenced off for everyone else. So that's why it was blocked.
That was during the communist era. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, anyway, I really enjoyed it. It was a short time on the ground, but I really enjoyed it. And you had some fabulous hospitality. So thank you again.
It's a pleasure.
So now we're getting close to the wrap up here. And this is where we get to, well, we don't have much hair to let down, but to let our hair down and have a little bit of fun. So we've got something called the magic mirror, and it's meant to be, as we say, a window on your soul. We ask a few pointed and probing questions, 15 in total, and meant to be spontaneous and fun. So are you ready to bare your soul?
Fire away.
Okay, fantastic. So first question, favorite aircraft, civilian or military, current or historical?
Blackbird SR-71, 3.5 Mach, there's no competition there.
Absolutely, yeah, and it was revolutionary for its time, and it still is. We need to get another supersonic passenger airplane in service. I never got to fly the Concorde.
No, me neither.
Yeah, and I've never seen the Concorde ski. You know the Concorde ski, right? Not too many people know that airplane,
Yes.
but it's one of those things where you see it at a distance and you're thinking, oh, is that a Concorde? And then you look a little bit closer and you go, no, this thing's got an Adam's apple and a bunch of other weird stuff on it, right? It's I don't think it ever flew, but interesting story on that airplane as well. So something a little more domestic now. Preference, apples or oranges?
Oranges.
Okay. And of course, you're Italian. Coffee or tea?
Well, strangely enough, tea.
Really? Wow. I would have just assumed coffee. Okay. Flat or sparkling?
Oh, there has to be not sparkling, super sparkling. Badois,
Okay.
Perrier,
Okay.
San Pellegrino, not the little fizzy, really sparkling.
Okay. Well, after the tea, you reclaimed your Italian citizenship. That's good. Preference, cats or dogs?
I've had both. Now I have a Labrador, so dog, let's say.
Okay. Scariest animal?
For me, because I lived in the countryside where the animals were, lice. I got attacked, from those that come from the ship, got a lot of poisoning, lice. It's the scariest thing. I know that it's not that big of a thing, but
well, sometimes the smallest are the most fierce too, right? So certainly the most tenacious. Favorite classic car?
Oh, I know for sure. Ferrari 365 GTS Daytona convertible. The Miami Vice one, which actually unfortunately wasn't really the real Daytona, but it was a Corvette mock-up. But
well, when I come to visit you again, you can take me for a ride. I'm sure you've got one in your garage, right?
I wish.
So here's an interesting one for you. Being a fan of history and a student of it, famous person, living or dead, you'd like to have dinner with?
I would say Leonardo da Vinci over Napoleon Bonaparte, but the fight is up. But you have to pick one, Leonardo da Vinci.
Okay, well, you get the privilege of two, but yeah, Da Vinci would be an interesting one for sure, and Napoleon likewise. But Da Vinci had an amazing life, and they're still trying to figure out his brilliance. So there you go, right?
Exactly.
Okay, how about your greatest fear?
This is tough because it gets personal, but my greatest fear is not to age gracefully, let's say. I would prefer to go out young and still healthy, so to speak.
Yeah, we all have that James Dean fallacy, right? So, but
yeah,
but yeah, it's interesting. We're both of the same vintage as well, and as you get older, you realize that I think we age more gracefully than our parents because I think they lived harder, both work-wise, but I know my parents. Life-wise, but my parents, smokers. When you had a party or a gathering at the family house on a Friday, there was a little bit of alcohol involved, and I think I think they lived a little harder than we do, and we're a little bit more conscious. So I'm hoping we're all aging a little bit more gracefully
exactly.
as we go. So
exactly.
Well, we'll move from something a little more profound to something a little more frivolous. Favorite dessert?
I'm not a big fan of dessert, but the one that I can pick over anything else is the Apfelstrudel.
Okay, well, hey, I'm of German stock, and I grew up on that stuff. So yeah, absolutely, I agree.
And there's three places in the world that make it very good. One is Cortina d'Ampezzo, the pearl of the Alps, we call it, and there's going to be now the Olympics in
That's right.
in few weeks. And if anybody is going to be in Cortina, please try. There's a place that does only that basically, and is the best Apfelstrudel this side of the Alp. I'm sure that north of the Alp there's better ones, but this side of the Alp is the best one.
When you think of all the Italian sweets, it's interesting you go German, right?
Yeah, I mean I'm not very big on sweets, but that one I love it. That's one I love it.
Okay, fantastic. Earliest memory?
Well, I like to say one. Maybe it's not the earliest, but it's very early. And my grandmother took me to the airport and eventually became the manager for in Perugia. And I went to see the Frecce Tricolori, which is our national acrobatic team. And at that time, we're still flying the Fiat G91.
You got an early start. I only came into aviation in my second year of university, so I was a little bit slower to the game than you.
I always had the passion. I wanted to be an astronaut more than a pilot, but it's a little more complicated to become one.
And reality and life kicks in, right? So that's for sure. So here's another one for you. Most used app on your phone, excluding WhatsApp and Outlook.
Well, you'll be surprised, but on my phone, there's no Outlook, and I'm resisting to install it. And the actual most used app on the phone is the phone app, if we can call it that. I'm still using the phone as a phone.
Okay. Well, you're old.
I like to talk to people.
That's good.
I like to talk to people. I don't have Instagram. I don't have TikTok. I don't have Facebook. If I have to text somebody, I call the person. I prefer.
And it's funny because there's been this sort of etiquette that's developed over the last 5 or 10 years that you have to text somebody before you call them, right? And then every once in a while you get a call from somebody direct, and you're like, what the hell? It must be an emergency, right? Like, who's going to call me without texting me first? So it's interesting. The modern era has a few new rules it didn't have a decade ago. That's for sure.
No, and I'm sure it happens for you the same. But I still remember phone numbers of some of my high school mates. That you were dialing with the dial phone, and I still remember those names by heart.
As a kid, I was a collector of antiques and all kinds of things, right? And somehow in my little hometown in Saskatchewan, in the middle of the Canadian prairies, there's this town called Vibank. It's 30 minutes outside of the capital city of Regina. And there was this hotel, little local hotel that had been run by this family for years and years. And I have an ashtray that my parents had. Of course, everybody had ashtrays back then, right? But it's the Maple Leaf Hotel. The proprietors are Joe and Alice Zaba, and their phone number is 22. 22, right? So it must have been one of those old exchange ones, and you're going, wow, like I have
The
no idea
switchboard.
how to date it. How do you date this thing? But yeah, when you get a 2-digit phone number, you know that you're at the early stages of the technology. That's for sure. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's interesting.
Absolutely.
So, okay. Now, this is an interesting one. Again, asking in Italian, this could be a tricky one. Favorite movie of all time?
For this one, I have no doubts because it's Blade Runner, the original one from 83, 82, 83 from Ridley Scott.
That movie is one that my wife and I watched early on when we got together over 30 years ago, and about every 3 or 4 years we rerun it, and it's really well done, right?
It's but I actually read the book before I watched the movie because it's Philip Dick, and the original title was "Do Android Dream of Electric Ship?" Yeah, I have an account that I use for participating in, like say, forum thing, and I'm Rick Deckard, still to this day.
No, it's a classic, and it when you watch it again and again, you start to see more and more layers in it as well. So yeah, at least every 3 or 4 years we do it again. Maybe this will be a good Christmas activity for my wife and I.
With a killer soundtrack too, with a killer soundtrack as well.
Absolutely. So now here's a more difficult one. You get one song to listen to for the rest of your life. What is it?
This is a tough one. I would take Message in a Bottle, but the Police, but it's a little dark, let's say, and so maybe
a lot of those Police and Sting songs are dark when you start layering them back.
Yeah.
They sound cheerful, and you're like, my God.
Yeah. Or let's say if I want to lighten myself, you see The Crime by Sade. I'm still a guy from the 80s, so that's what I go for.
That's a good one. Now, here's the impossible question, and what I will say is I'll help you with a little hint. There's some relevance in the conversation we've had, but I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 100. What's the number?
My number is 99.
You're absolutely wrong. Strangely enough, and you've watched the same talk show that I'm talking about that we've kind of borrowed this idea from. Nobody ever gets it right. But last time with Elizabeth Brown from Victoria, she got it right. It was incredible. It's almost psychic. But the number was 12 for 12 million passengers. There you go.
Very good.
So okay. But you won't get a failing grade. That's an impossible question. So now we're getting to the tail end. Favorite place you visited and the top bucket list destination you'd like to see?
I was fortunate enough to go around the world also for work, but I think that the favorite place I've been, considering that all that is going on, is still the favorite place is Jerusalem.
I spent 3 years in Jordan, but I never got across the bridge into Israel or Jerusalem, but that's on the list as well.
Well, 2 places, I don't know if I can go. Well, one for sure I cannot go for now, and as you know, you said that I'm a history buff, or I like history, and there are 2 places I would like to go. One is Persepolis in Iran, now Persia before.
Yes.
And there's Leptis Magna in Libya, which is one of the best preserved Roman city, not in Italy, but you cannot get there, of course, for clear reason. So those are 2 that I would like to visit. Then I was in Botswana, but didn't manage to go to the Okavango Delta, which is a place that I would like to visit. And I was in Lisbon, but I would like to go see Porto instead.
Absolutely. And Iran is on my list as well. And if you get a chance, there's a series with Joanna Lumley, and she's an old British actress with a bit of character, and she does the the Silk Road. She starts, I think, in Austria and goes all the way through to the Chinese border. She gets stopped at the Chinese border, but she travels all the way through the region and also through Iran. And it's, it's fascinating. It's one of those places that whole Silk Road, like all those countries along there, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Georgia, all of those are, and places like Georgia, people don't realize that's where winemaking started.
I don't know. I think it's called the Golden Fleece. That's the Argonauts were trying to steal, from somewhere in there. Yeah. But the metaphor wasn't that it was actually a fleece of a sheep. It was actually the grapes. It was the wine that they were going to steal.
Exactly. Yeah, made you warm and fuzzy for sure. Okay, final word. What's your mantra in 10 words or less? Your personal mantra.
It's something that I adopted fairly recently. It was told to me by actually an airport executive, used to be the director general of Milan Airport. And Giulio told me once, l'ottimo è nemico del bene. That means that when you try to get to perfection, you forget the good is good enough.
Those are words to live by, and you're talking to a recovering perfectionist, and you can sometimes be paralyzed by perfection, right?
Exactly.
I think some people just get too hung up on absolutely getting everything down, buttoned up exactly the way they want it, and then the moment passes you by, right?
And in our industry, in our world, it applies very well because we're trying to do every airport would like to be the next Singapore, but sometimes you need to stick to the basic, do them as best as you can, not trying to always do the last mile when it's not needed, because to get to the last mile, everything goes by.
It's the law of diminishing returns, right? Well, again, that's a great place to wrap up, and it's been an absolute pleasure spending some time with you, Piervittorio, and I hope to see you again soon on the conference trail or elsewhere.
It's always a pleasure, and I would like to thank you and your partners and the whole team for the great job you do, and for looking after me at one point, and I hope that we can, as you said, cross again soon, one place or another. In Persepolis or in Jerusalem, since you've never been there.
Well, I'll take you up on that for sure. Thank you very much.
You too. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us on Open Mic. If today's conversation sparked ideas or questions, we'd love to hear from you. Visit airportir.com/open mic to listen to more episodes, connect with our team, and stay informed about the global aviation developments that matter to you.